Good afternoon, everyone. We will begin our webinar in exactly 2 minutes. Hello again, and welcome to today's webinar, From Surviving to Thriving, Resilience and Post-Traumatic Growth Among Mental Health Providers. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This webinar is sponsored by the Northeast and Caribbean Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, or MHTTC, housed at Rutgers School of Health Professions, Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Professions. My name is Kati, and I'm the project coordinator of this center and will be facilitating the webinar today. The MHTTC is funded by SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, to enhance the capacity of the behavioral health and other related workforces to deliver evidence-based and empirically supported practices to individuals with mental illnesses. Please visit the MHTTC Network website for additional information at mhttcnetwork.org. Next slide, please. If you're interested in staying up to date with the events and products the Northeast and Caribbean MHTTC is providing, please sign up to receive our email communications. You can sign up at the bit.ly link provided on the screen. Next slide, please. Following the webinar, you will be asked to complete a brief survey. We value this feedback and use it to improve our activities and inform future activities. The surveys are also important because our continued funding is linked to the completion of these surveys. So we thank you in advance for your feedback. Slide. We also want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded and will be posted to our website along with the PowerPoint slides in the next couple of days. Next slide, please. We encourage you to interact with our presenter during the webinar by using the chat feature. Please post any comments or questions you have in the chat, and I will collect your questions as we go and ask them of the presenter during the Q&A time towards the end of the presentation. During the webinar, our presenter may pose questions to you. Please use the chat feature to answer those questions. Next slide, please. This presentation was prepared for the MHTTC network under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA. All material appearing in this presentation, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain and may be reproduced or copied without permission from SAMHSA or the authors. Citation of the source is appreciated. At the time of this presentation, Eleanor McCann-Katz is serving as SAMHSA Assistant Secretary. The opinions expressed herein are the views of the presenters and do not reflect the official position of the Department of Health and Human Services, or SAMHSA. No official support or endorsement of DHHS, SAMHSA, for the opinions described in this presentation is intended or should be inferred. Now let's begin our webinar. We have Dr. Michelle Zechner with us today. Dr. Zechner is an assistant professor at Rutgers in the Department of Psychiatric Rehabilitation and Counseling Programs and has focused her career on the promotion of health and wellness for people with mental health conditions, their families, and the staff who support them for over 25 years. She has worked in a variety of settings, including academia, outpatient mental health programs, psychiatric hospitals, nursing homes, and training services. She conducts research teaches and mentors students, and consults with state psychiatric hospitals on the implementation of evidence-based mental health practices. Her research interests include health promotion interventions for people living with mental health conditions, preparing mental health and health professionals to work with people with mental health conditions, multidimensional wellness, developing comprehensive health promotion interventions to improve the health of older adults, and motivation for physical activity. She has co-authored peer-reviewed and technical publications on health promotion, evidence-based practices, and interprofessional initiatives to improve health for people living with mental illness. She is a sought-after trainer and has given presentations locally and nationally on topics ranging from wellness and recovery, aging with mental illness, supporting mental health staff self-care, and health promotion strategies for people with mental health conditions. Welcome, Dr. Zechner, and I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you, Kati. Welcome, everyone. I thank you for joining me today from wherever you're coming from, and from my home office here. I want to start with this great quote by Richard Tedeschi because we should hope that our experiences, even the negative ones, can help shape us and make us grow into stronger people. Today, we're going to talk about how to move beyond surviving difficult situations as mental health providers and people and move toward building resilience and thriving. As mental health providers, we face many challenges and stressors, and for many of us, the past year has been particularly challenging. Tending to our own well being and care is critical to thriving. Sometimes it may feel like extra burden or challenge to focus on our self care and bolster ourselves up. But if we don't do this work, we run the risk of being less effective support to our clients, having difficulties with our families and friends, and even becoming unhappy and burned out. So I invite you to sit back and listen today and share some of your thoughts in the chat as we go forward, and even maybe try to commit something for yourself each day that's positive and builds your resilience. So, as mental health providers, we most likely came into this profession because we really care about people and we want to make a difference in the world. Sometimes the skills that make us good at helping others, like empathy, being a good listener, and being interested in others, means we might get overwhelmed by the care that we have for them. It can be really hard to turn off the care and concern. I remember working with someone and being so worried about them, it would keep me up at night. And I imagine you have similar experiences. And if we work with people in significant psychiatric distress, like people experiencing homelessness or veterans, or people experiencing violent crimes, we would be at risk for vicarious or secondary trauma, which comes about from helping others in stressful situations. So we have to remember that as mental health providers, we have our own lives and cares and concerns that we bring when we show up for our clients, obviously. In fact, our own experience of trauma and difficult experiences are part of who we are and may show up when we least expect it. And in fact, you may be at increased risk for secondary trauma if you've been through a traumatic experience and helping someone with similar experiences. Too much stress can create health challenges, as we probably all know, both physical and emotional difficulties. But we know that despite the stress and the challenges, let's see if I can make this work. Yay! Uh, we all have many strengths, coping challenges, and supports that get us through these difficult times that contribute to our resilience and can prevent the health challenges, stress, and maybe even burnout. So let's talk about this a second. We probably talk about resilience with our clients all the time, but how do we think about it for ourselves? I imagine everyone has some experience with this, especially this year and during this time. One of my favorite resources to build up my own resilience and to share with others is the Greater Good Science Center at the University of California at Berkeley. And the link is posted under the resources section. They've got some great suggestions for many actions to become more resilient and hopeful. Their ideas about resilience include how to recover after a difficult situation. It could be really anything that's difficult for you, like maybe losing a job or losing a pet, or even recovering after a good event that's stressful, like moving to a new place, getting a new pet, or getting married. Having resilience and trying to move forward includes using positive coping skills we have, like walking, breathing, praying, and also being open to new coping strategies and trying something new. And it might evolve over a certain amount of time. I know for me, I'd been doing Qigong for a while, and in the past 5 months, it just didn't work for me. So I started reading poetry and listening to others reading poetry and doing other activities which I felt boosted my resilience more than Qigong. So it's always good to check in with our coping strategies to see if they're still working for us. Also, another way to build our resilience is to identify when we meet challenges that come up for us and recognize our courage and strength. When we take the time to acknowledge our strengths, we are recognizing ourselves as competent and capable people who can meet new situations that come up and manage them well. When I thought about the resilience for mental health staff and what that might look for us, it can be some unique challenges for us as well as opportunities. I thought about it, what it might look like for our work situations with our clients or service recipients. When we have a difficult interaction with a client or when we have a traumatic event, or even sometimes working with our colleagues can be a little bit challenging in these times. So I wondered if we might be able to think about our strengths. And one thing that's really in our corner for all of this is being able to focus on a personal mission. And that is being able to remember that we're in this because we care about others, that we want to help, and that we're engaged with others. Something else that we can consider is that we probably want to make the world a better place. When we can remind ourselves of who we are as individuals and professionals and why we went into this line of work, it can reframe a situation for us, which can help keep us going. It's important too to manage our own stress and regulate our emotions as they come up. It's really easy to react and maybe get lost in a moment. I know that's a big challenge for me. Um, Finding those activities that help us burn up the stress and feel calmer and contribute to the ability of getting up every day and going back to work is really powerful. Resilience for us as mental health staff is also really important to think about any trauma that we experience as a result of the traumatic events our clients go through. Being witness to that can really be challenging. And when we address our resilience, we may be able to prevent burnout, which is something that I think we are all really at high risk for, especially these days. So I'd like to take a moment to ask you to fill out some things in the chat box and ask you, why is resilience important to you? So if you just take a moment, find your chat, and add in a few thoughts about why resilience is important to you.
Thank you, Dr. Zechner. To our participants, you can change the settings or control the settings in the chat box feature by looking at the drop-down menu where it says panelists and then panelists and attendees. Just wanted to let you know. So Dr. Zechner, in the chat, we have why is resilience important to you? We have someone that says it provides strength so that I am the best I can be for my family after work, keeps my motivation up to continue on my path. I want to be able to be strong now and for many years to come. Oh, wow. So many responses. It helps me to be a better clinician. It keeps me young. Hard work allows me to be present for my family when I'm not working as a mental health professional, so that I can be my best self and best for the others that I serve.
Thank you, Kati. I actually have seen some of those and I am really struck. Thank you so much for taking the time to share why resilience is important for you. And one thing that I'm taking away as your thoughts are coming in is really that old adage, right? If we don't put the oxygen mask and thinking about resilience, if we don't put our oxygen mask on first, then we're not able to be a good support to our clients or service recipients and our own families and be more present in our own life. So I really appreciate you all sharing those thoughts with me. Thank you so much. We do have to think about our attitudes that are helpful for resilience. I could see that all of you are really dedicated to being more resilient practitioners and human beings. And the attitudes that are helpful for resilience are being hopeful and optimistic even while in a difficult situation, which can be challenging. In those days when I wake up late, I've left for work late. I got stuck in traffic, and my first client didn't show up. That could be really sort of a difficult situation, but trying to bounce back from that and reframe it can be really helpful, which is leading me to perspective. Having perspective and remembering that those annoying mornings or difficult conversations with a client, that's really one moment in time. And in the bigger picture, it may not matter that much. It can be really frustrating in the moment, but trying to have that perspective can give us more a sense of bouncing back. Of course, purpose and meaning, and this is going to be a theme in a lot of the things we talk about today, are also very important to consider. Knowing what gives you purpose and meaning in life, and who gives you purpose and meaning in life. Also, making sure that you have self confidence and uh, believing that you can manage those difficult situations when they come up. Seeing them as annoyances or difficult for today, but just a blip in the screen is helpful for moving forward. Some reflection is helpful, and I will admit that I sometimes go from reflection to perseveration. Maybe you do as well, worrying about what I did or didn't do. But having some healthy reflection about your day and what went well and focusing a little more on the positives can be very helpful in building resilience. And last but not least, of course, having a good sense of your wellness. And when I say wellness, of course, I mean everything. I mean your physical wellness, your emotional wellness, and occupational, financial, environmental, social, all the different dimensions in wellness is to make sure that we're actually having some sense of self care every day and being healthy. So, researchers suggest that a few things can help us build resilience. Lately, I've been thinking that we all need at least one positive building activity each day, positivity building activity each day. And for me, when I'm struggling with my workload or the situation in the world, I actually prescribe or tell myself I need 2 or 3 positive experiences a day. And the first really is to surround yourself with good or positive people, places, things. And what do I mean by that? The people who will support you and be positive, the places that can support your well being, like nature, a religious community, the beach, or any place that makes you feel good. And that could even be your favorite chair or your backyard. Next, it's really important to continue to connect to your supports, the people you have healthy relationships with who will listen to you and care for you when you need it. And that can be, of course, friends, family, coworkers, or supervisors. Another really interesting concept is to take a purposeful pause. Take that moment in a day to notice your current emotions and thoughts. Is there something that's going on that's a trigger for your distress? Is there something that you can do to calm yourself in the moment? You might take a self care break, or we're calling it a pause, a meditation, or a prayer, any kind of moment where you're disconnecting from your current activities and thoughts, but a few moments where you just stop and breathe, trying to let go of any emotions you have in that moment of worry or fear and just be in the moment. Resilience is also related to figuring out how to use your strengths and skills to solve problems. We all have strengths and skills that help us move forward and keep us going. And spending time to reconnect with those skills might help give you perspective on a problem or a challenge. I want to give an example of strengths and skills because I know that we all have them. And many of the people that I've been talking to lately have been organizing their closets. And that is so admirable. And I think it's wonderful. And that's not a skill that I possess, I will tell you. And so when people tell me about their clean closets, I have to remind myself that I have other strengths and skills, including being creative. And I've been writing some haikus to keep myself entertained. So my haikus are looking very well while my closets are not going so well. So it's important to remember that you have unique strengths and abilities that are going to help contribute to building your own resilience. When we think about resilience at work, that can be a little more tricky. Getting support for the difficult times at work can come from a lot of different places. It might be from your coworkers. I know that there are people that I turn to for support when I hit a bumpy patch who are there for me. You might also have mentors at work or working in other places that can support you. And don't forget your supervisor. If you've hit a rough patch, getting feedback and support from your boss is a great place to turn if your boss is a supportive source. Of course, taking that break for lunch, a walk, or just to sit in your car quietly for a few minutes is also a good strategy to build your resilience. And of course, I am really guilty of this. I usually don't take lunch and I work through and I don't usually give myself a break. And I get kind of irritable and overwhelmed. And I note that it really would be better next time if I took a little break. And finally, it's always okay to seek help if you're having more serious problems and noticing that at work or in your private life. You could start with employee assistance to see if there are free options at work for counseling or other supports. Because it's really important to remember that even superheroes like you need to get help at some point in their careers, and getting help is a sign of super strength and not of weakness. So I'd like to take another little break here and hear from you. If you could enter in the chat, what actions build your resilience?
So in the chat box, we see meditation, attending therapy, journaling, exercise, self-reflection, choir, being mindful, spending time with family, be empathetic, prayer, cooking, long walks, being in nature, listening to music. Someone put phase 10, getting fresh air daily no matter the weather. That's unique.
Yeah, I like that too. That's something I try to do. Is I have taken so many walks around my neighborhood. Right now, I'm working from home, as I imagine some of you are some of the time, um, and I've gotten to know my neighborhood very well. I've witnessed spring, summer, and fall in my neighborhood walks, and just getting outside and breathing is helpful, especially when we spend a lot of time on our screens, which some of us might, and I know that some of us are actually uh, out there helping people directly. And of course, connecting with friends is really very important. And what I also note in all of the things that people have noted about resilience are that these are actions, that being purposeful in your behavior can really be helpful in terms of building your resilience. And I'm so happy to see that people have such a wide variation of things that they're doing to keep up their resilience. Now, I'd like to talk about growing from adverse events. We've been talking about the day to day elements of resilience, sort of the everyday things that we do to keep from getting too overwhelmed by our work, by our lives, and the attitudes that can support it. I'd like to shift to an area that's probably relevant to all of our service recipients or clients, and likely to ourselves at all. Also, what happens when we experience difficulty that goes beyond a difficult session or a fight with your kids? When we have an extremely prolonged challenge, traumatic event, sudden death, or other challenging situation that literally changes us. Some people might argue that the pandemic is a prolonged series of challenging times for almost everyone. There's a great video I saw recently about a lobster. Maybe you know this video as well, but the idea is that a lobster outgrows its shell repeatedly, and it's sort of a traumatic event. It has to sort of break free from its old shell and grow into its new shell, and then it continues to break free from its old shell. And I think it's a great example of how we have to keep growing as we live. We're not lobsters, but I think that in some ways we are experiencing challenges that are really deep seated for us sometimes. And they provide opportunities for us to grow into new people. And I imagine that most of the people we support have experienced a major challenge in their life recently, whether it's a lost job, a loss of a loved one, transition to a new housing situation. Resilience is a personal skill or ability to bounce back after a difficult situation. But we're going to be talking about how sometimes resilience isn't enough and people experience such a traumatic situation that they are completely changed by it. And that's called post traumatic growth. You probably have heard of it. And it's a term that captures the notion of growth and new meaning making following a difficult situation. I recently worked with Lori Ashcraft, who some of you might know, who's an amazing peer leader. And she referred to post traumatic growth as using the energy and pain we experience to make a significant change in our life for the better, which I thought was a really beautiful way to say it. I know I've experienced traumatic events. I imagine many of us have. And what a lovely thing to imagine that we can use that pain to help us move forward when we feel like we can't. Um, and Richard Tadashi and his colleagues developed the term and thinking behind post traumatic growth because they noticed that some people take extremely difficult situations and become transformed as a result. So let's unpack that for a minute. You may have helped a client or a family member or friend, or you yourself may have experienced an extremely difficult time in life and have had to try to make sense of the event and move forward in a healthy way, which ended up completely changing your perspective and understanding of your life. Post traumatic growth can be considered a process where a person is going through the hard experience of personal growth, reflection, and development in the moment after a very difficult and challenging situation. But it can also be considered an outcome of that process, so that the person who has been through the growing process can emerge like this clover plant out of a difficult situation. So, this little clover is popping out of a concrete crack. It might be considered a deep cognitive restructuring or literally changing the way you think about yourself and the world. That process may be very different for each person in how we move forward and how we understand the world in a different way. It's about overcoming instead of being overwhelmed by fear. I bet you have some examples from your clients' lives, maybe from your own life, even. Post traumatic growth can be related to a very traumatic event, or it can be something that was very challenging and encouraged positive growth. I was really struggling trying to think of some famous examples, but I came up with Oprah and thinking about her overcoming of extreme difficulty and abuse growing up. Another example could be something that my colleague was talking about in terms of her experience with psychiatric hospitalization and how she found herself believing that recovery was not possible until she became active in the peer movement, which completely transformed her perspective of herself and her sense of well being. Other examples could be from being in an accident or a health scare. An example from my own life was having a serious health condition when I was 17 and trying to understand it and thrive in life, recognizing my strengths, appreciation for feeling healthy. I tell you what, that really changed my outlook as a young person, and trying to connect with other people. So many things shifted and changed for me, and I bet for everyone who's gone through some of these really difficult situations that life has. There's actually an instrument, a survey called the Post Traumatic Growth Inventory that's freely available from the University of North Carolina, which is in a link is posted in your resources and references, and it measures post-traumatic growth and looks at 5 different domains. And the first is appreciation for life, or that feeling of positive connection with one's own experience. After significant fear or loss, we may get better at noticing the small things in life and feel more gratitude for our everyday lives. It may help to put our work into more perspective as well. We may also rely more on our personal strengths. So I will be more creative, however, not not so great in the organization category. Remember your strengths and use them, whether it's a sense of humor, organizing people, cooking, singing, puzzles, or listening. Those gifts make you who you are and can help you grow after challenging events. For many people, there is also a spiritual change with new meaning, values, and purpose that are created. That can look like a deepening of religious faith or like taking more time for meditation and being in the woods. Gaining perspective and reframing can help growth as well, considering new ways of thinking about our lives and the solving of difficult problems. Finally, connecting to our friends and family can facilitate post traumatic growth. As mental health professionals, when we grow from our experiences, that actually helps protect us from burnout and compassion fatigue while helping others as well. And the interesting thing is that when we're helping others and we witness their post traumatic growth and work towards healing, it can influence us and build empathy towards clients with trauma. Of course, there's also a risk if we're connected to our clients or service recipients and they experience trauma, we can be very challenged and experience vicarious trauma from their experience. Working on ourselves and knowing our triggers can help protect us from this. Watching someone recover and grow after trauma can also broaden our spiritual perspective to find the good again and highlight the ability of people to overcome so many things. And lastly, by being a part of someone's journey of post traumatic growth, you could feel good about your helping skills. You could feel assured that you are making a difference in the world and helping that person reclaim their life after a life altering experience. That's an amazing accomplishment. Now I'd like to turn our discussion over to being able to bloom and flourish even during these challenging times. Martin Seligman is one of the founders of positive psychology, and he's studied what makes people have more fulfilling lives. You may have heard of him. He talks about a concept he calls flourishing, or ways to thrive and grow each day. Dr. Seligman developed a great way to think about flourishing, which is the PERMA model. It's a general overview of what helps people grow and flourish in all areas of life. If we think about our lives, striving for positive emotions and a focus on good events will contribute to flourishing. But as Seligman notes, for some of us, I'm going to raise my hand on that, some of us, positivity and natural cheerfulness is not always a part of our personality. And that's perfectly fine. And it doesn't mean that we can't flourish, but it does mean that we may need to be a little more conscious of our attitudes. And sometimes we might have to stretch ourselves a little to focus on the positive and reframe our difficulties in our lives. Focusing in on these areas can improve our day to day life and encourage resilience, and maybe offer ways to support our post traumatic growth. I hope that you'll take some of these ideas that appeal to you and leave the rest. The P in PERMA stands for positive emotions. Focusing on positive emotions can be a choice. And I think I've heard this several times, is that our natural inclination as humans is to focus on the negatives, right? We're sort of hardwired for the fight and flight. So finding the good is not always a natural experience. But that doesn't mean we can't gently reframe our thinking throughout the day to remind ourselves of the positives. There are also strategies and skills that can help us practice positive thinking in the moments where it's a challenge to be positive. A good place to start is to spend a few minutes thinking about your life and the area that you might like to be more positive in. That might include your personal life, family life, or work life. And of course, the trick to this really is to find a doable area. When you consider your readiness for change, it's important to imagine where you might be able to make a change. For some of us, just addressing one small area of life might be the best place to go, such as generating a positive thought about a slightly annoying situation. Try not to pick the hardest thing that you have in your life to reframe just yet. Start with the small things. Once you've identified somewhere in your life to focus on, you might consider making a routine to check in with yourself and your thoughts about that situation. For example, you could take a self care break, stand up, stretch, listen to music, pray, go for a walk, and listen to your thoughts. If they're more on the negative side, you might practice reframing. An example could be a negative thought of, this client is always complaining, they're never happy. And trying to reframe that to, I know this person has been through a lot, and even though it can be hard to see sometimes, she brings laughter into our discussions. Notice the other activities that you can do that help you feel more positive, and whatever that might be. And in the chat, I encourage you, if you like, to indicate what builds your sense of positivity. Some people might read inspirational quotes. Some people might rollerblade. Some people bake cookies. Some people play basketball. Some people play with their cats, like me. Had someone said, turning off the news. I think that's a great suggestion. Someone also suggests saying three things that make me happy or good things I've witnessed before bed. That's a great suggestion. Someone else suggests gratitude list. Absolutely. And surrounding myself with positive people and humor. Fighting for social justice. I always remind myself that I am the light. So you are the light. We are all the light. We're helping out in very difficult situations and laughing. And someone else pointed out that going to therapy, having a personal therapist or counselor, can be very helpful in staying positive. That's great. That's really great. And the point is not to necessarily be a Pollyanna or overly cheerful, but just look for the good. I think I read a book once, or I heard about a book called Good Finding, and literally that's sometimes what you have to look for is the good in life. The next step for flourishing, according to Seligman, is to be engaged in activities that use our natural strengths to address challenges and completely engross us in the moment. That's when you're able to use your strengths, like connecting with other people, which I imagine we all have as a strength, or empathy, and sometimes challenging, which describes the situation for many of us when we try to help other people. Sometimes this feeling of connection and engagement is called flow. You may have heard that term before, developed by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, who is also a positive psychologist. And it describes that moment when we're completely lost in doing something that we enjoy very much and uses our natural strengths and abilities and stretches us just a little bit. Think about the tasks that you enjoy or the actions that you enjoy in your life. Has there ever been a situation where you literally lost your sense of time while doing that task? Where you looked up and you said, oh my gosh, an hour has passed and I've done whatever? Uh, Engagement is also about being present and aware in the moment for what's going on in your life. And I know that a lot of you mentioned mindfulness, and it's a great practice to just stop in a moment and imagine what's going on here. Where am I? How am I doing? And another thing to consider is If you're multitasking, which I imagine we all do, I know I'm guilty of it. When I'm trying to do two or more things at once, take a quick inventory and ask yourself, and I ask myself, is this task really important to me? Or can one of these tasks wait? If something's important to you, then focus on that task wholeheartedly and use your strengths to get it done. One strategy to consider your own engagement in your life is at the end of the day to just review your day and think, hmm, when was I completely engaged at work or completely engaged in my life that I lost any sense of time? Sometimes we engage in the tasks required by work or home life at the expense of things that truly matter to us. It's important to notice when we say, I used to like to, or when I have the time, I prefer to. These are the areas in your life where you might be more engaged and want to spend a little more time. The next important ingredient to flourishing is meaningful social relationships. These relationships that support flourishing are positive and make us feel cared about, supported, and loved and valued. Research has demonstrated the importance of social relationships in helping us be resilient, strong, and flourishing. There are some practical strategies you could do to try to build your friendships and gain the most benefit from them. I don't know if any of our attendees are from New York State, but I know that New York State had a wonderful social interaction campaign where I think it was Strive for Six, or I don't remember exactly the number, but the idea was that you should reach out to six people that you know by text, email, call, in some way during these times. Some other examples would be to build your social network by knowing the people that you interact with better, maybe asking them open ended questions about the other person's interests, family, and leisure. Another way to strengthen relationships, of course, is to connect with someone in your life that you haven't talked to in a while. And a strategy to build your flourishing is to think about your day and those positive interactions you've had with somebody or several people. Some people find it helpful to make a note of these and try to actually notice what exactly they felt during these interactions. And meaning is the next step. Recognizing the meaning or sense of higher purpose in our lives is an important element in flourishing as well as post traumatic growth. For some people, meaning is related to spiritual beliefs or connection to a religious community. For some people, this is related to values and our work roles. Scientists have suggested that life satisfaction is more related to meaning in life and being engaged in your life than money or material things. What's that song, Money Can't Buy You Love? Um, I don't know. So, connections to something larger than yourself is also protective against depression as well as helping to create a flourishing life. So, staying focused on what's important can support our self care and give us perspective by not getting lost in negative thinking or the challenges. Additional practical strategies to increase meaning in life include thinking about your day and identifying the meaningful portions of your day. Was it a discussion? Was it treating yourself to lunch? Meaning building is also found in attending regular supportive spiritual or religious activities or communities. Also, volunteering is or helping others is a very important way that we can connect to our sense of meaning. Accomplishment. We can't forget that. That's the A in PERMA. Accomplishment means regularly setting goals and moving forward, which can give us a sense of accomplishment, which is really also necessary for flourishing. Having accomplishments means feeling proud of ourselves and taking note of our successes. It could be something related to helping someone, which we do probably every day, or it could be something that you're proud of mastering, like learning how to use the new software on your phone or the Zoom. There are some practical strategies you could try to increase your sense of accomplishment. You could review the current achievements you've had. You could focus on your successes that you've experienced. And you can also list your strengths. There's a great book called Strength Finder, that lists a lot of strengths and is quite interesting. And I know that the University of Pennsylvania is their positive psychology department also has a wonderful online survey that you can do to find your strengths if you need help with that, which I sometimes do. Also being willing to celebrate small wins, whatever those are. And I just want to take a moment to acknowledge all of you. What's something you've done this week that was an accomplishment? So, in the chat box, if you just take a moment and list any accomplishment that you have made today or this week. Oh, someone mentioned Viktor Frankl. Yes, that's a wonderful, wonderful author to consider. Overdue homework. Wonderful. An exercise. Yes, that is wonderful. These are great accomplishments. I am a big believer in movement as a way to cope. It helps me, and I think it helps a lot of people. People have asked for help. They've stayed sober, which congratulations, that's a real sense of accomplishment. People are spending time with their loved ones. They're going to therapy. They're surrounding themselves with friends. This is wonderful. And someone fixed their dryer. That's great. And got rid of the junk in the basement. That's really good. Someone washed the dishes. That's, it's the small things in life for sure. I can relate to that. And someone else finished a workshop. I guess I could put that in my accomplishment this week too, as I finished finished a PowerPoint and presented it. So, um, and people have cooked as well. So that's great. Congratulate yourself. I congratulate you. It's important to look at these little successes and remind ourselves that we have accomplishments. We can get lost in the day to day in these times, in these challenging times, and working with our clients. And it's important to make sure that we're doing things and noticing what we've done well. So, how can you use PERMA? I think there are a lot of different ways you can think about it, using it, but don't let self care stress you out. I know that some people have said to me, Michelle, you talk about self care, but that's just like one more thing you have to do. But it is one more thing we have to do, but it's a habit. And it's sort of like brushing your teeth is a thing you have to do, making breakfast is a thing you have to do. Um, Washing your clothes is a thing you have to do, but if it's a habit, if it's something that you do every day, then it might be a reframe to a burden. Trying to reframe what's going on in your thoughts and your work, it's not easy, but it's a great way to keep yourself strong and resilient. I know it's not easy for me either, but if I keep trying these PERMA ideas, they are slowly helping me reframe my thinking. And making yourself a priority. That's not always easy when we're helpers, when that's who we are, but it's very important to keep ourselves strong and at work. Perma concepts can remind us that resilience and self care are critical in the line of work that we do to stay balanced. Also, perma concepts might be helpful to share with your supervisees if you supervise people, or your colleagues and the clients or service recipients that you support. Finally, I think PERMA can give us an infusion of focus on positivity, even in challenging situations, as a way to protect ourselves and maybe do a little singing in the rain, which leads me to this. This is actually a plaque that someone gave me a while back when I was struggling, and it's in my hallway. It says, "Life isn't about how to survive the storm, but how to dance in the rain." And every time that I walk by it, I'm reminded that I want to thrive and relish life as best I can each day. So here are some suggestions for this. I imagine that you all have some great suggestions and you've listed some great suggestions about how to dance in the rain that you do. And that could be dancing, but it could also be singing. or moving or laughing or feel calmer or just thriving in whatever way you define it. So in summary, we've talked about resilience and the ability to recover from challenges and that bounce back ability. That's not really a word, but I just made it a word, bounce back ability. And post-traumatic growth is the life-changing process of personal growth following trauma or a very difficult event. And that perspective really totally shifts a person. The PERMA model of flourishing, which we went over, can expand our strategies and thinking about resilience and also perhaps support post-traumatic growth that we're going through or the people that we worked with. All right. That is the end of my prepared notes. I welcome any questions or comments in the chat box. And I love someone,
Thank you,
Jenny
Dr.
just, yes.
Oh, hi. Thank you, Dr. Zeckner. So, as Dr. Zeckner said, feel free to enter your comments or questions actually in the Q&A pod um, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or I can also read them to Dr. Zeckner from the chat box. Dr. Zeckner, can you move the slide over to the QR code just in case the next slide? There we go. So while you're preparing your questions, I also would like to mention that this QR code that you see on the screen is for our evaluation. Like as I mentioned before, our network is funded through SAMHSA. And as part of receiving this funding, we're required to submit data related to the quality of this event. So please take a moment to complete this brief survey. And we still have time for questions and answers if you have a specific question regarding self-care or post-traumatic growth or vicarious trauma. Dr. Zeckner will be with us to answer.
Thank you. And I do want to comment that someone said that they sing that they had heard that singing for 20 minutes a day can relieve anxiety and that works for them. And that's really interesting. There's a lot of evidence that singing is really helpful in reducing anxiety because you're breathing. You're doing some good breath control and getting it out. I do love to sing. And of course, in these days and times, it's best to sing in our own houses. Singing, unfortunately, is a yeah, it's best to do in our own house at this point. Someone's asked about the resources. Thank you. I will go back to the resource page. There's a wonderful resource on resilient self-evaluation. And I believe, Kati, if this is correct, that if people people will automatically receive a link to these slides once it's been published. Is that correct?
Yes. So I will be sending an email once these slides are uploaded to our website. It should be available on our website by early next week, but all of the participants will be notified via email when they are posted.
Okay, great. So don't worry about, you can take a picture of this, but you will be getting the slides where you'll be able to just click and go directly to um, these resources. The first is a wonderful self-evaluation about resilience, which I think is really good to do when you're feeling sort of stressed out or wondering where you're at in these days and times. The Greater Good Science Center, as I mentioned, that link is particular to the resilience to stress activities, which has a letter writing activity. Um, and it has silver lining activity. It's got a bunch of different activities, but you can also just go to the main website, ggia.berkeley.edu, and see the Greater Good Science Center. They've got a podcast and different activities. I really find them to be quite good. The post-traumatic growth website is listed there, and that's Tedeschi and the colleagues there who did the post-traumatic growth inventory is also listed there, which you can get for free, and all of if you're a researcher, you can get that information for free. You just have to ask them nicely and say that you're not going to sell the information. There's a good TED Talk that Richard Tedeschi does on uncertainty and post-traumatic growth that I recommend. And also another video on what PTG or post-traumatic growth is and how to facilitate it. And an information about the PERMA model that we just went over. And finally, there's a great piece of information from Harvard University that I discovered on the Human Flourishing program. So that's sort of interesting. We've got our resources and references here. The references I tried to use in APA format, so you should be able to look up. If you can't find any of these articles, you could certainly reach out to us and I could try to help you locate it in your system. And there was questions about the, I don't know what this is called, the QR code. Okay, there we go. So if you could please complete our survey, that would be really helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Zechner. In the interest of time, we still have some time to answer some questions, but I have a question. I saw a comment earlier about setting boundaries with their family. Could you maybe comment on that or expand a little bit on setting healthy boundaries, as a way to practice compassion, not only for ourselves, but for others as well?
Yeah, that's a really tricky one, and I think it's probably something that most mental health uh, staff and professionals that we often work with our clients and service recipients on is setting those limits and boundaries with our relationships and things in our life. I think actually saying no sometimes is a very powerful way to set a boundary and saying, I was reading something recently that saying no means that you're actually saying yes to something else, which helped me a lot because I'm someone who really doesn't like to say no to anyone or anything, which is part of my helper personality. But when I can remind myself that saying no to something is actually saying yes to something else, like my own sense of well-being and health, I think that is helpful. Um, and I don't know about other people, but a lot of times boundaries, it's also sort of family culture oriented. So in terms of what families are expected people to do and how they expect them to do it, sometimes you're not allowed to set limits or boundaries. But the interesting thing is that when you or we set a boundary with someone else, it doesn't really matter how the other person responds. We have basically changed the situation for ourselves, and by proxy, the other person is changed by our limit setting. Oh, wow. Okay. Another really good comment here. Dealing with guilt for healthcare professionals to work extra hours and shifts during COVID. And that is a really, really difficult question. I really appreciate that you asked it. And I think that is really a personal decision in terms of what you have energy to do. In terms of your own self care and well being, if you are able to offer additional shifts, great. But if you know that this is going to cause additional stress and challenge for you, it might be helpful to sort of make a compromise if you can in any way to sort of say, if I say, I think I could do this, one extra shift a week, but two or more is just too much for me. I don't know if anyone else has a similar situation who would like to comment on this difficult situation where someone is guilty, feeling some guilt about not working extra shifts at this time. It's a hard question. It really is. And I know that the work that we do in mental health, especially for people working directly with others, I do a lot of work at the hospitals, the state hospitals here in New Jersey, and a lot of staff are being pressured to go to the hospital because people are there and they really need the assistance. And yet, if you're working, a triple, not even a double, but a triple, what good are you to yourself or to the people that you're supporting when you've, worked for more than 20 hours straight? Um, and other people are commenting that yes, that people are feeling guilty because they're not an essential worker and they'd like to be helpful. And definitely, you have to prioritize your well-being. Someone else said, you have to know that when you're not well, when things are kind of uneven inside, that it can be very, very hard to support others. So I send everyone good wishes. I know this is a very difficult time, and I'm so grateful that you took the time to join us today and think about these topics. And I encourage you to think about the small things you can do for self-care every day.
Well, thank you, Dr. Zeckner. Thank you so much for providing us with a wonderful presentation on this very important topic. Um, I will just announce, just for as a reminder, that I will be sending out a follow-up email that contains an evaluation link. I'm sorry, a link to our evaluation. And in the next few days, our slides will be posted, and then along with the link to to the slides on our website. We will also make the recording of the Zoom presentation available as well. And in addition to that, I will be sending a certificate of completion. So all of that will be emailed to the email that you provided on the Zoom registration. And that concludes our presentation. Dr. Zeckner, do you have any other comments?
No, I just want to wish everyone well and keep working on self-care.
Thank you. And I hope everyone who attended today, you and your loved ones stay safe and well. Thank you.